There's a scene in The Matrix that's always stuck with me. Neo wakes up in that pod for the first time, covered in slime, tubes plugged into his body, eyes blinking against the light. And in that moment, he realizes he's been asleep inside a system his whole life. Everything he thought was freedom was actually programming. He's not waking up to freedom, he's waking up to reality. And when I first saw that scene years ago, it hit me like a liver punch. Not because of the special effects, but because something deep down whispered, that's you. Look, I wasn't hooked to machines, but in my life, I've definitely been plugged in. My matrix just looked different. Maybe it was a spreadsheet of macros or a calendar of clients, a feed of followers, a checklist that promised peace if I could just stay perfect. It was productivity packaged as purpose, and every goal I hit, every magazine cover, every new PR in the gym was another program running in the background. And just like Neo before he woke up, I mistook performance for freedom. I remember one night in New York, backstage at Fashion Week, the air smelling of, hairspray and adrenaline, maybe a little bit of booze and cocaine. Models rushed past, the crowd was humming behind the curtain, flashes going off like lightning. And I stood there, dream realized, feeling completely hollow. I'd built this world to prove I'd escaped my past and arrived at my future, but it was really just another simulation, one where I was both the architect and the prisoner. Maybe yours doesn't look like a runway or a spreadsheet. Maybe it's your career, your marriage, or your morning routine, the system you built to keep you safe. That's the strange thing about the Matrix. It isn't science fiction, it's psychology. It's what happens when the systems we build to keep us safe become the systems that keep us small. And in our world, those systems have new names: discipline, productivity, optimization, self-improvement. Don't get me wrong, growth matters. But at some point, self-development turns into self-surveillance. You start watching yourself the way the Matrix watches Neo, tracking every move, judging every emotion, demanding proof that you're still in control. And that's not freedom, that's maintenance. Welcome to Food on the Mind, Awaken Genius, where we break free from food obsession, unlock our potential, and build a life worth living. I'm Jeb Stuart Johnston, and here we dig into the psychology, philosophy, and strategy behind lasting change. Because transformation isn't just about what's on your plate, it's about what's on your mind. If you're here, I appreciate you. If you find this episode valuable, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and if you're watching on YouTube, drop a like and a comment. It really does help more than you know. Now, let's dive in. So here's the question I want to explore today. What if the modern pursuit of growth, the apps, the hacks, the mindset work, is just the new Matrix? What if we're not escaping the system at all, but reinforcing it every time we chase control? Because I think most of us aren't Neo. We're Cypher, aware enough to know something's wrong, but still craving the comfort of the illusion. And yet there's hope in that awareness, because once you see the system, you can start choosing how to live inside it. That's what this episode is about. How to wake up without burning out. How to use self-development as liberation, not surveillance. And how radical acceptance, the willingness to see reality exactly as it is, can be the doorway to real freedom. When Neo wakes up, he sees the machine for what it is, a system that doesn't need chains because it controls through illusion. Michel Foucault saw something similar long before the internet existed. He wrote about a structure called the Panopticon. It's a circular prison with a tower in the center, and from that tower, a single guard could see every cell, but the prisoners couldn't see the guard. They never knew when they were being watched, so they behaved as if they always were. The brilliance and the horror was that the system no longer needed force. Control became internal. Power became invisible. And when I look at the modern wellness world, the self-development space I've lived and worked in for over a decade, I see that same design everywhere. Only now, we don't need guards. We've all become our own. We count our steps, we track our macros, we post our progress, we analyze our sleep scores, and call it accountability. But underneath it all, there's a constant hum of self-surveillance, a subtle anxiety that if we don't monitor ourselves, we'll fall apart. You can feel it in your body. That tightness in your chest when you break a streak, the guilt when you rest, the whisper that says, someone's watching. The human brain craves predictability, so we mistake surveillance for safety. That's the modern panopticon. It's not a tower anymore. It's a dashboard. It's an app, a mirror, a comment section, an algorithm. Most of these tools work, right? They make us fitter, more productive, more focused. But they also make us afraid to be messy, spontaneous, or simply human. They train us to equate visibility with virtue, to believe that if something isn't measured, it doesn't matter. I see this every day with my clients. They start a plan with excitement, new goals, new habits, new apps. But within weeks, the tracker becomes the judge. If the numbers look good, they feel worthy. If not, they spiral. And the same tool that promised freedom becomes another cage. That's the essence of the panopticon. You don't need someone else to punish you when you've already learned to punish yourself. But awareness isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to free you. Once you can see the mechanism, you can decide how you use it. You can still track your workouts or your nutrition, but from curiosity instead of control. You can still post your progress, but as expression, not validation. That's functional awareness, using tools consciously without letting them use you. You stop mistaking the panopticon for your purpose. You start choosing what's worth watching, and that's where we begin to move from surveillance to self-leadership, from fear to radical acceptance, because you can't dismantle a system you refuse to see, but you can walk through it differently once you do. By now you might be thinking, okay, I see the system, but at least I'm awake to it. That's what everyone in the Matrix thought too. Everyone believes they're Neo, the one who saw through the illusion, who broke free, who's living in truth. But most of us, we're Cypher. Cypher was the guy who knew the truth. He'd seen the real world, the darkness, the chaos, and he couldn't stand it. So he cut a deal with the machines to go back to sleep. He said, ignorance is bliss. He knew the stake wasn't real, but he didn't care. He just wanted comfort. That's what self-development has become for a lot of people. And I say this with love because I've lived it too. We've tasted awareness, but we keep choosing control. We talk about growth, but what we really want is relief. We want to know ourselves, just not so deeply that we have to change the way we live. I've coached countless people who can articulate their entire psychological landscape. They can name every part, every trauma response, every nervous system state. They've read the books, they've done the courses, they've learned the language. But when life gets hard, they still default to the same perfectionism, the same self-criticism. They've woken up intellectually, but not emotionally. I did the same thing. For me, it looked like journaling every day, meditating, eating quote unquote clean, and still feeling disconnected, but convincing myself it meant I was growing. There's a seductive comfort in awareness. You can feel enlightened while still staying safe. You can keep your hand on the thermostat of life and call it mastery. But that isn't awakening. That's maintenance masquerading as mastery. And the world applauds you for it. Neo didn't just see the Matrix, he embodied the truth. He surrendered control. He stopped trying to bend the world through effort and started moving it through faith. That's what real liberation looks like. Not control, but coherence. Not constant analysis, but trust in your nervous system. Awareness without embodiment is the new illusion. It's the Cypher paradox. You can know the system inside out and still choose the stake. You can post about healing while still living in fear. You can talk about authenticity while still performing it. That's why radical acceptance is such a threat to the Matrix. because it dissolves the illusion that you have to control reality to be okay. It says, yes, the world is chaotic. Yes, you're imperfect. And yes, you can still be free. When a client finally understands that, when they stop fighting their feelings and start feeling them, something incredible happens. The nervous system settles. The gaze softens. The war ends. Awareness wakes you up. Acceptance lets you stay awake without running back to sleep. So maybe the question isn't how do I become Neo? Maybe it's how do I stop being Cypher? How do I live in truth without letting it harden me? How do I hold awareness and compassion in the same breath? That's the work. That's the real red pill, and no one can swallow it for you. If Foucault's Panopticon was a tower in the center of the prison, our version lives in our pocket. Every scroll, every post, every notification is another flash of the tower's light. We've seen and we're seeing all the time. And the wild part, we volunteered for it. We built a world where the line between watcher and watched doesn't exist anymore. We measure our value in visibility. We call it connection. But half the time it's surveillance disguised as belonging. I catch myself in it too. I'll open an app to share something honest. And within seconds, I'm thinking about engagement, reach, impressions. Metrics that have nothing to do with truth. Even vulnerability has become an aesthetic now. We don't just heal, we broadcast it. Even our grief comes with captions now. That's the real genius of the Digital Panopticon. You don't even need a warden when the prisoners are posting their own progress, right? We've turned our personal evolution into performance art. Our growth gets filtered, captioned, and monetized. Our self-expression becomes self-exposure. I remember when I first started sharing my story online. At the beginning, it was pure service, connection, wanting to help people feel less alone. But over time, the algorithm started whispering, show more, perform more, give them what they want, they'll click. And if I'm honest, I listened. Because the system rewards obedience. It tells you that the more you show, the more you matter. It's not just social media, it's how we've learned to think. We evaluate even private moments like posts no one will ever see. The question is, what happens to your nervous system when you live that way? When your sense of safety depends on feedback loops and followers, your brain never gets to rest. Your body never stops performing. You're always half awake, waiting for the next validation hit, like Cypher tasting the steak, knowing it's fake, but craving it anyway. And here's the hope. The gaze isn't going away, but it doesn't have to define you. You can use the same tools consciously. You can post from presence instead of performance. You can share because you mean it, not because it'll trend. When I finally made that shift, something softened. I stopped chasing metrics and started measuring alignment. I stopped asking, did this perform? And started asking, did this feel true? And that changed everything. The algorithm didn't disappear, but its power over me did. And that's radical acceptance in the digital age. Not deleting your account and moving to the woods. That does sound nice, though. But learning to show up without losing your center. Being visible without becoming a product. Being connected without being consumed. The Digital Panopticon only works when you need its approval. The moment you can look into that camera and say, I'm already enough, the tower goes dark. The Digital Panopticon doesn't just watch us. It trains us. Every like, every notification, every metric nudges us toward a more efficient version of ourselves. It whispers, if you can quantify it, you can control it. And so we start optimizing. Not just our feeds, but our lives, our sleep, our steps, our thoughts, even our spirituality. We call it growth, and sometimes it is, but underneath, there's that same quiet hum of the system saying, be better, be faster, be more. The gaze may have moved from the tower to the screen, but the pressure's the same. to prove our worth through performance. And that's where the next layer of this illusion begins, where self-development stops being liberation and turns into another form of obedience. That's what I want to explore next. How optimization became the new religion of our age, and how the pursuit of better can quietly destroy our capacity to feel enough. Somewhere along the way, growth turned into a scoreboard. The Panopticon trained us to watch ourselves. The digital age taught us to optimize ourselves. And now we're all living inside a kind of invisible lab, testing, tracking, tweaking, forever upgrading the software of me. I've done it. You've probably done it too. We download another habit app, right? Chase another streak, stack another protocol. We measure mindfulness in minutes and call it peace. We reduce purpose to productivity and call it progress. We hack sleep, hack focus, hack love. We keep trying to outperform our own humanity. And at first it feels good because data feels like control. You can see the numbers move. You can prove you're improving. But over time, the pursuit of better quietly becomes the fear of not enough. The app becomes the authority. The plan becomes the parent. And your own intuition, the part of you that actually knows what you need, gets quieter. I see it all the time. One of my clients, let's call her Erin, came to me with 6 different trackers running at once. Calories, macros, right? Heart rate variability, sleep, mood, even her water intake, down to the ounce. She could quote every metrics, but she had not felt joy in months. Her morning started not with a breath, but with a report card. And one day she looked up from her phone and said, I just want to stop being a project. That was the moment things changed. Deleted the apps. We built a rhythm instead of a regimen. She started walking outside without counting her steps, cooking without weighing all the ingredients. At first she panicked. It felt like free fall. But then something softer appeared, space, presence, the quiet hum of her own life returning. That's the hidden cost of optimization. You stop being a person and start being a process. Every moment becomes an opportunity to improve instead of an experience to inhabit. But here's the shift. Self-development isn't the enemy. It's only dangerous when it's driven by fear instead of values. When you're growing because you're scared of who you are, not because you're inspired of who you could become, radical acceptance flips the script. It says you don't have to fix yourself to be worthy of growth. You can pursue excellence without abandoning peace. You can use structure without surrendering your soul. That's why in my work, we practice value-based growth. It's not about chasing perfection. It's about alignment. So ask yourself, is this practice expanding my life or contracting it? Is this tool serving my freedom or feeding my fear? When the answer is expansion and service, keep it. When it's contraction and control, let it go. Because the goal isn't to optimize your humanity, it's to honor it. You don't have to destroy the system. You just have to stop obeying it unconsciously. Growth that begins with acceptance ends in freedom. When Erin stopped being a project, she didn't become passive. She became present. That's the quiet revolution hidden inside radical acceptance. It doesn't erase ambition or silence discipline. It simply changes who's in charge. The same systems that once demanded obedience can become tools for awareness, if you're the one steering them. And that's the real evolution of this work. It's not about quitting the chase. It's about changing the driver. Because growth that comes from fear leads to exhaustion. Growth that comes from ownership leads to peace. So how do we do that? How do we keep growing in a world that's always measuring without losing our autonomy or our soul? That's where we go next. Into the practice of harmony. How to live inside the system consciously, to build without bondage, and to let self-leadership become the quiet form of freedom. So if the matrix is everywhere, if the panopticon is built into the world we live in, how do we keep our freedom inside it? The answer isn't to run away from it. It's to walk differently within it. Because the goal isn't escape, it's alignment, not perfection, but peace. You can't stop the world from watching. You can't delete every metrics or mute every voice, but you can decide which ones get to matter. You can choose to participate consciously instead of compulsively. That's what radical acceptance really is. It's not giving up, but waking up. It's the moment you stop fighting reality and start leading yourself through it. When I think about my own life, there was never a single moment where the noise went away, right? I still have clients, deadlines, a body that ages, a mind that wants to control everything. The difference now is that I meet all of it with a different posture, one of acceptance instead of resistance. I've learned that freedom isn't the absence of constraint. It's the ability to choose your response within it. Foucault had a term for this: technologies of the self. He meant the inner practices that help us become ethical beings, not controlled by external authority, but guided by internal truth. For me, that's what coaching really is: teaching people how to use these technologies consciously, not to optimize themselves, but to inhabit themselves. It's the work I do through the Awakened Genius Blueprint, which rests on three real pillars, all grounded in radical acceptance. Number one, inner conflict. You start by acknowledging the parts of you that are at war: the perfectionist, the rebel, the critic, the protector. Instead of trying to silence them, you learn to listen. Each one is a strategy for safety, and when you stop fighting them, you start leading them. Number two is our strategic skills. We build skills that support autonomy, not obedience. Boundaries that protect your energy instead of your ego. Habits that serve your values, not your fear. Structure becomes sacred only when it's flexible. And number three, nervous system intelligence, because you can't think your way into peace. You have to feel your way into safety. Your body isn't the problem, it's the portal. Every breath is data, every heartbeat is feedback. When you can accept your state without judgment, you reclaim the steering wheel from the system. This is what it means to harmonize growth and freedom. To live in a world that's always tracking, but to remember that your worth was never a metric to begin with. You can still grow, you can still strive, but you do it from groundedness instead of guilt, from values instead of vigilance. You stop treating yourself like a project and start relating to yourself like a person again. That's what radical acceptance gives you. Not a smaller life, but a steadier one. You can still have goals, discipline, ambition, but they stop being ways to prove your worth and start being ways to express your truth. So no, you don't need to unplug from the matrix or destroy the panopticon. You just need to stop mistaking them for your home. You can exist without them and still belong to yourself, because freedom isn't found in rebellion. It's found in relationship. And lately, I've been thinking about this a lot on the mats. I coach a group of young men in jiu-jitsu, teenagers and 20-somethings. They're trying to find their footing in a world that tells them to be powerful, but never teaches them what that power actually is. What I see in them breaks my heart sometimes. So many are being pulled into that red pill world online, fed ideas about dominance, control, and waking up to how the system works. They quote the Matrix but miss the message. They think being unplugged means rejecting empathy, partnership, and vulnerability. But the story of the Matrix, and the Panopticon for that matter, was never about control over others. It was about liberation from illusion, about awakening into responsibility. Freedom isn't rebellion without purpose. It's awareness with compassion. That's what I try to teach them through jiu-jitsu, because jiu-jitsu is truth in motion. You can't fake your way through it. It humbles you, forces you to breathe, to feel, to adapt. It teaches power through presence, not posturing. When those young men learn to regulate under pressure, to lose without collapsing, to win without arrogance, that's an awakening the algorithm can't sell. It's real masculinity. discipline rooted in empathy, strength, guided by awareness. And that's why this work matters. Because the same forces that hijack wellness also hijack meaning. They twist the language of awakening into a performance of power. If we want a world where men lead with integrity instead of insecurity, we have to give them spaces on the mat, in mentorship, in conversation, to practice awareness, humility, and radical acceptance. To learn that being awake isn't about being above others. It's about being with them. I didn't escape the matrix. I just stopped letting it program who I am. That's the part nobody tells you about awakening. It's not some grand explosion of enlightenment. It's quieter than that. It's the moment you realize you don't need to fight everything to be free. You just have to stop performing for the system that was never built for your peace. For me, it happened slowly, not in a single breakthrough, but in small choices that just built a different kind of rhythm. Turning off notifications. Lifting weights because I love the ritual, not because I'm chasing a number. Cooking dinner with music playing instead of tracking macros. Letting silence be enough. These moments are where freedom lives, not outside the system, but within it. When you start living from intention instead of imitation. That's the quiet rebellion. To grow without performing. To build without proving. To love without optimizing. And that's the invitation I want to leave you with. You don't have to destroy everything you've built. You don't have to quit social media or throw away your goals or become a monk. You just have to come home to yourself. To remember that growth doesn't require surveillance and healing doesn't need an audience. The real awakening isn't about escaping the matrix or dismantling the panopticon. It's about seeing them for what they are. Frameworks that will always exist, and choosing again and again to live from the inside out. So maybe freedom isn't found in a revolution. Maybe it's found in the gentle act of radical acceptance, seeing reality clearly, breathing into it, and responding with love. That's leadership. That's liberation. The awakening isn't a single moment. It's a lifelong practice. Awaken yourself, awaken your genius, awaken your power, walk your path with intention, and I'll meet you along the way. Thank you so much for listening.